So the Bunnymen are at war with the orcs, but the orcs don't have a reason to be at war with them. No. Oh, okay, all right. Hmm. But what if the Bunnymen were really at war with, the humans, because the humans are kind of like over here near the orcs? Now that's stupid. It's even dumber. Why won't you work? No, 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 no! Could it be that the goblins and orcs are stealing resources? But then why would the goblin and orcs want resources from the desert when I have them written into the plain lands? No. No, 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 no. World building can be very difficult. There's a lot of things that go into making a compelling world, and you have to fill that entire world full of details. And it can get very frustrating when either those ideas don't seem to mesh together or they don't seem to be flowing very well. And it can get to the point where you just want to scrap the entire thing and call that world call it a dud. Well, before you go ahead and throw that out, you can get some nice clarity for your world just by theming it. So today, we're going to be talking about how you can do just that. So Dan, when you're talking about theming, what do you mean? Well, a theme for a world is a set of preconceived notions or ideas that dictate how that world operates. For example, anyone who's roleplayed in Warhammer Fantasy knows that despite that world having heroes and magic like most Dungeons & Dragons setting, it is not a world that you ever want to visit. Because that is a world that is beleaguered by war, death, disease, and corruption. It is a world of hopelessness, and a world where no one leaves it untainted. And it's just not a happy place to be. Now, granted, it's an exciting place for stories of, battle time heroics and tragic heroes to take place, but it is not exactly the place where you're going to feel the magic of friendship, for example. It is a world where you are going to learn about the true bond you can have with your with your brothers in arms as you march to your imminent doom in a probably hopeless cause. It's just that type of world. It has a very specific feel to it. And if you've ever played in a setting or read a story where you had that very specific feel, where you had an idea of how things could turn out, or just generally if an element was introduced to it, you would know the general shape that it would take. And you can get that same sort of feel with worlds that you make. Obviously, somebody had to make that sort of setting that, would portray that specific feel. Well, how can you make use of that? For one thing, by taking on a theme, you can help yourself find that clarity in your ideas. I mean, when you're making a world, like I said before, there's a lot of ideas you have to fill it up with. And, in a preview episode about 6 months back when I talked about focusing your creativity, you have lots of ideas. And, new GMs coming into making a world have lots of ideas to make, and not really sure how to fit them all together or which ones to use. Well, theming can help with that. It can help you clarify those ideas and give your world a very distinct feel. But okay, how do you find that theme? There are people out there who argue that theme does not come first. Theme comes afterwards. You make your world, and if it's good, you'll have a very distinct theme to it, and you'll be able to tell what the themes are. Though, yes, you can find themes after the fact in your world, mainly in just how things operate and how your nations operate and how your NPCs operate. You'll see patterns, and those patterns dictate the themes that you put into that world intentionally. Well, by taking an intentional theme, you can focus your efforts. But how do you do that? Well, here's some suggestions. So when figuring out your theme, probably the first place to start is with your audience. Much as I mentioned before with the Warhammer setting, it's a very specific setting for a very specific audience. It was designed for people who like their stories being filled with action and those sort of heroes where they do the right thing even in the face of unwinnable odds. And, you know, the men and women who, you know, still stand up for what's right even when, you know, everything around them is turning to crap. It's the same thing with your setting. Whether you're building your setting for a specific person, a specific group, or, you know, even just like people who like similar things to you, that's fine. But be aware that you are building it for an audience. Someone at some point is going to be on the other end of this world and running around in it. And if you're trying to make a setting not just for your group and just, you know, as a campaign setting to put out there, like maybe on DriveThruRPG, this is very important to keep in mind. You want to figure out who you're making your world for. An easy way to do that is to ask yourself this. This setting is for blank. Who likes blank? Now, let's say, let's just take, for example, when you first thought you wanted to build a world, you wanted to make it kind of like, you know, you like barbarians and stuff, so you kind of wanted to build something kind of like Hyboria in Howard's Conan series. Well, you're starting your theme. You're recognizing the fact that you like that barbarian setting, and you know that other people like that as well. So this setting is for fans of barbarians who like Howard's Conan. Right there, that's a fundamental idea that you can build your world around. There are certain things inherent to that idea that you don't have to bother trying to fit into your world, because you know that in, you know, a Hyboria-esque world of sword and sorcery, you're not going to find magic schools. You're not going to find you might find talking dragon, but you're not going to find dragons that live side by side with humans. You're not going to find, you know, grand academies of magic, or at least not ones that aren't evil. Point being is, once you figure that out, you will get a fundamental understanding of something to build off of and something to focus your ideas with. Further, once you have that, you know, kind of look at that and figure out what preconceptions your audience and you have about how that world would work. Now, I mean, in the Conan sort of world, we know that, you know, it's a sword and sorcery world. It's a very we know that it's a very brutal world. It is, you know, the strongest rule. It is a world full of barbarians. It's a world full of monsters. It's a world full of evils. It's a very savage setting. But beyond just knowing, like, just that general sort of stuff, what sort of really look at what sort of preconceptions you have about how religion would blah, 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 blah. It's a very savage setting, but even beyond just having an idea of it being a brutal world, you know, what are your preconceptions about how religion works in that world? Well, you know, they're probably worshiping old gods, you know, very primal gods, probably gods of battle. There are probably some people worshiping dark gods, particularly whoever's a magic user probably worships demons. You know, there might be gods of fertility and whatnot as very primal-based gods around fertility and lust and battle and wealth and hedonism. Yeah, those really primal set of gods that, you know, it's they're probably at war with each other, that their, you know, followers would be as well. How would politics work? Well, you know, in this savage sort of world, except for probably in certain locations where cities are a little bit more developed, you're going to see a lot of tribes, you're going to see a lot of hordes, and, you know, politics, you know, the politics of this sort of world might be just to the extent of, instead of having our hordes fight each other, we'll send out our champions, and, you know, whoever wins will stop debating over, you know, this land, or you can have my daughter. You know, politics would be that sort of stuff. Or, what sort of dangers would you see in this world? Well, in this world, you're not really going to see, say, dangers of changing morality. Because people have a very set morality in this sort of world. Might rules, defend your own, magic is evil. So you're probably not going to see like changing morality. You might deal with disasters as it's a savage world, but you might not necessarily, deal with extraplanar invading races. That seems kind of out of place. I can understand, seeing maybe a interdimensional beast every now and then in a savage barbarian sort of setting, probably brought forth by a cult or something. But, you wouldn't probably see portals opening up and, beholders coming through to attack everybody in this sort of world. Because it's just not built that way. If you're building it around Howard's Conan, sure, there'll be fantastical beasts and stuff, but you're probably not going to be seeing, like, interstellar aliens coming down and attacking you. Look at what sort of preconceptions you might have about how that world would work and explore those ideas. And, really compare those to what you think your audience would expect. So once you have an idea of who your audience is and what sort of preconceptions they have about how this sort of setting should work, how this world should operate, ask yourself, what choices can you make to reflect those concepts? And these choices pretty much run the gambit from, what races to use, what places will be called, what sort of gods are worshipped. For example, let's say you want to have multiple races. That traditionally in this barbarian source, and you're probably not going to see a lot of different races. But you want to have races. That's fine. It's still your setting. It's still your world. You get to change it. But, what sort of races might you see in this sort of setting? Knowing that you're drawing from Howard, and, Howard was in that same writing circle with H.P. Lovecraft, perhaps you want to have a race of snake men. And the snake men are perhaps created by, a snake god that might be aligned with magic. And, as such, they're a dark race, and they're perceived as evil, but maybe they have a very strict code of honor. Maybe they have a serpentine knighthood or something, but, they have a feel to it that fits into the setting now. They're snake men, they're evil, they're aligned with that god of magic. Maybe they're led by mages, but, they have a code of honor. They're sounding part of the setting. Or, maybe in addition, maybe you take the brutish idea of savages and go even further with that. You have your snake men, you have your human tribes, and maybe now you want to introduce, ogres to this setting. Ogres, they're big, they're brutish, and essentially you take everything that is the barbarian and you push it to 11 with the ogres, right? They have no high society. They live in they don't even really live in proper tribes. They live in herds. They might be intelligent enough that they can name things and have a language, but their herds travel the plains of this world and really just destroy anything that they feel like. They go from place to place like locusts, just eating up whatever resources that they find just because they are ogres. But, maybe they're intelligent enough that, if one or two goes out there, and they are bested by a human, they might respect that human's commands. So, okay, now you have snake men, and you have ogres, and you have humans. That's 3 races. That's pretty good. So, okay, now you have three different types of characters you can play. But those were all drawn from the concepts that you had, what this world was like. That's a savage world. It's not going to be a very civilized world. It's a very, dark sword and sorcery sort of world. And the snake men and the ogres fit with that, with the human barbarians. You can see them in this world because they have the same sort of feel. Because you essentially came up with them, using those notions that you determined before because you're exploring your theme. Let's say you want to pick your gods. Well, let's say you want to pick a good god and a bad god, a god that you can align with the concept of good and evil. Well, just knowing that magic is evil and otherworldly, the god of the snake people, the snake god can be aligned with magic and be the god of maybe the underworld or something. And the god of good is not going to be a civilized god of law or something. No, it's going to be a god of something that, barbarian peoples can respect. Perhaps a god of battle. Perhaps a god born of blood. A god that, brings righteous victory to those who follow him, to those who make their steel in his name. So maybe it's a god of steel and battle, whereas the other is a god of snakes and magic. And likewise, in this sort of world, it's going to be, you're probably going to have small tribes. Reproducing is going to be very important. Men would probably have multiple wives for that specific purpose. You're probably going to have a goddess of fertility then, which you can always have fun with later. Maybe have some cults to her that go a little too far, get it kind of Slaneshi sort of. But the point is, see, we're making decisions based upon our notions from the theme. We know that it's supposed to be a barbarian Hyboria-esque, and now that we know that, it's very easy for us to make decisions to go along with that. When it gets into us deciding, all right, what sort of conflicts can happen in this area? Let's say we want to use my rule of 3 from my previous world building episode. Pardon. Well, now we can look at that and we can fall back on our theme and know, all right, what sort of conflicts would come up in this sort of fighting over steel, fighting over resources, always good. Steel, water, livestock, blood feuds. What sort of conflicts come up with that? What sort of groups? Tribes, possibly a mage's thrall, wild men, monks, those sort of things. And now you can start filling it up. What sort of places would this be? All harsh places, pretty much. Desert, plains, forests, Arctic. You can maybe build a continent this way, maybe have mythical other continents. You can build off of the theme now that you have something to focus your ideas. And it'll make it a little bit easier for you if you actually spend the time to figure out what your theme is ahead of time. It'll give you that clarity and help you make the choices that you need to in order to construct this world to your vision. Now, granted, the concept of theming is kind of a nebulous concept, but, I did my best to try and elaborate how you can use it to help you when you're building your world. But, maybe there were additional questions that could have been asked that I didn't bring up, or maybe there's something else that you want to talk about that I didn't, or if you disagreed with something I had to say, please feel free to leave a comment below. Please like, share, and subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. And as always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.